Breaking news as President Trump announces a phased-in ceasefire between Israel and Iran, bringing a potential end to the rapidly changing conflict in the Middle East. Good evening, I'm Micah Ullman.
And I'm Cher Calvin. The ceasefire announcement follows a weekend of escalating tensions in the region after the U.S. conducted airstrikes at 3 nuclear sites in Iran.
Today, the Islamic Republic retaliated, firing ballistic missiles at a strategic U.S. military base in Qatar. That attack intercepted with no deaths or injuries reported. We have team coverage. Sarah Welch with local reaction. Retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer standing by.
But we begin with Chris Wolf in the KTLA News Center with the latest on the ceasefire. Chris.
Yeah, Cher and Micah, according to President Trump, the ceasefire will happen in phases, with Iran holding fire first, followed by Israel. President Trump says the official ending of their conflict, what he calls the 12-day war, will take about 24 hours. The ceasefire was announced after Iran tried to retaliate against the United States for bombing its nuclear facilities. Launched and intercepted midair. Iranian missile strikes against a U.S. military base across the Persian Gulf in Qatar were unsuccessful Monday, but that may have been the expectation. Neighboring countries closed their airspaces, and U.S. officials report no casualties at the largest American military installation in the Middle East. Iran had warned Qatar prior to the attack, according to those close to the situation. Iranian officials say the action was in retaliation for U.S. bombing strikes on 3 critical Iranian nuclear sites. President Trump responded on social media. Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and effectively countered. No Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost.
The president warned them not to retaliate, but he was also very clear that the threat of Iran obtaining nuclear capability is a threat not just to Israel and the Middle East, but to the United States as well. They've been very clear about their intentions and how much they hate us. Remember that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. All the proxies that have done such great harm to Americans over the years are at their behest.
Qatar is now calling on the U.S. and Iran to return to the negotiating table to settle a nuclear deal. The current climate should make that much easier. President Trump has announced a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran. Quote, officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world.
We have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds, because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild. The ceasefire was set to begin around 9 p.m. Pacific time tonight, with Iran standing down first. However, take a look at this. A short time ago, the Iranian foreign minister posted on social media, quote, the military operations of our powerful armed forces to punish Israel for its aggression continued until the very last minute at 4 a.m. Now, that was roughly 5:30 p.m. our time tonight. He goes on to say, quote, together with all Iranians, I thank our brave armed forces who remain ready to defend our dear country until their last drop of blood, and who responded to any attack by the enemy until the very last minute. We will have much more coming up tonight. For now, reporting live in the News Center, Chris Wolf, KTLA 5 News.
Chris, thank you. With more on where the conflict stands tonight, we're joined once again by retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer. Hal, thanks for making the time and taking the time. A lot happening very quickly. Let's begin with your reaction to the ceasefire the president announced. How significant is this? Are you surprised? And what can we expect in the coming 24 hours as this ceasefire is phased in?
Well, Mike, it moved really fast. I mean, it went from reports that Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar had been hit, or not hit, but targeted by these missiles. And then shortly thereafter, you hear about the ceasefire thing. This is big. It is significant. And one of the things I would point out is that the attack on Al Udeid was more performative, not really substantive. They coordinated it with the Qataris. They let us know that it was coming in. They used missiles that were easy to take down. They only used 14 missiles, which, by the way, is pretty much identical to what the number of large, massive ordnance penetrator bombs that we dropped on Iran. That I find that parallel interesting. So I find this significant, and I think it might be an entree to a more substantive diplomatic negotiation, one where we can actually get past some of those roadblocks and big obstacles.
So in light of that ceasefire, what is your assessment of Saturday's strikes, the scope, the timing, planning, and really, I guess everybody wants to know the effectiveness?
Cher, that was just an amazing operation. First, the deception operation, telling everyone that the B-2s are heading off to Guam, which to me actually didn't make a lot of sense. You don't save a whole lot of distance going to Guam, but that was purely theater to hide. You can't hide the fact that bombers are taking off from the air base, but basically they turn around, went the other way. And then this amazing, well-coordinated operation with decoys and everything else, putting those bombs exactly where they needed to go and hopefully getting the full effect on target. I mean, we can't tell too much right now. They're trying to work out the battle damage assessment, but it looks like everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. None of the radars picked up on our stealth bombers. There were no anti-air defense or air defense missiles that were fired at us. Frankly, it was by every description a flawless mission, and I think it demonstrated U.S. military technology, military capability, but also our technological capability to do things that no other country can do.
Hal, you touched on this. I want to walk through this in a little more detail. Iran retaliating today, firing more than a dozen missiles at that U.S. airbase in Qatar. Most of those missiles were knocked down. There were no casualties reported. The president even thanking Iran for giving the U.S. early warning. What was the rationale for that retaliatory strike? Do you see it as an attempt to save face?
Well, Micah, I got to tell you, that's the first time I've ever heard of thanking a foreign country for firing missiles at us. That was rather unusual. But they gave us early warning, and it was truly face-saving. This was purely aimed at the Iranian domestic audience for the regime. They had to do something. They had to say we're relevant. They had to say they're striking back. Of course, they're saying that I think 6 of the missiles went in and they actually caused devastation. The reality is 14 went in, 13 were shot down, 1 went off harmlessly into an open desert area where it did nothing. They were easy to shoot down missiles. These were not those hypersonic ballistic missiles. These were missiles that they knew were going to be able to be taken out by us. So they made their demonstration. I mean, nobody likes to see missiles shot at their base. Let me just say that. But now it's over. And I should mention, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Doha. I was going through there. So this isn't difficult for me to visualize. I just visualized it. So they got this done, and hopefully that's all there is. And hopefully that takes care of a lot of other potential threats, too.
Well, meanwhile, the Ayatollah is said to be sheltering in a bunker, as he's also named 3 possible successors. So what do we know, and what does it tell us about Iran's future?
Well, Cher, that's what's really interesting, is what's going forward, what's going to happen out of this. He has basically named his successors, and you got to remember, martyrdom is kind of part of the philosophy, if you see, that comes out of this sort of theocratic sort of mindset that they've had since 1979. So he's named his successors, basically saying, if you take me out, I've already named who's going to replace me. However, there are rumors coming out that hardliners are very dissatisfied with the regime. And you got to remember, 80 to 90% of the population in Iran despises the regime. So there's a lot of internal dynamics within the country. And I know the term regime change has been used a lot. It may be less regime change from the outside and more internal that could cause this happen. And don't forget what happened in 1991 in the Soviet Union. That happened really fast, caught a lot of people off guard, and some of the same dynamics are probably in place here.
All right, Hal, let's talk hypotheticals. We have a NATO summit coming next week. If the ceasefire does not hold, talk about alliances and global dynamics, perhaps Russia's role or China's role, especially if Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz, where 40+% of China's oil supply passes through.
Oh, that would be huge. If they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, there's a lot of problems there. Obviously, the Revolutionary Guard Corps has a bunch of small boats that they could potentially put into service. They have the Navy has a lot of submarines, and they also have a lot of sea mines. That actually may become the dominant discussion, is doing all these things. And we don't have a lot of mine clearance capability. That was something we kind of gave up for the most part after the Cold War. So that could cause a huge problem, a massive spike in oil prices. You will see certainly China get very vocal and very much more involved. They've been sitting on the sidelines for the most part. Russia right now is actually doing quite well. They probably wouldn't mind seeing it because they're selling their oil at a premium. So they're finally making some revenue, some significant revenue off of their oil sales. That's kind of a weird dynamic of this whole thing. But hopefully this thing will hold. Hopefully this won't fall there. But if you see that, I think at this point you might see the Gulf states openly start to say stuff. Maybe be more vocal about siding against Iran. That's possible, but they're playing their cards pretty close.
As we wrap up with 1 minute left, Hal, you touched on it, the billion-dollar question: does the ceasefire hold and lead to lasting peace at the end of this 40+ year proxy war?
It's interesting. There's a lot of reasons why Iran will not want to negotiate their way out of this. First off, they've been decimated. They've been wiped out. With a lot of their key weapon systems or key capabilities. Their nuclear program, as far as we know, has been seriously debilitated. I don't know about using the term obliterated. That's kind of a new military term for me, but they may not have anything left in that regard. And then their conventional capabilities are very limited in terms of what they can do. So they want an off-ramp. They want a way to get out of this thing, and they need some way to do this and to try and save face to preserve the regime.
Retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer, good to be with you. Be well.
All right. Thanks, Micah. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.